You can be a super serious songwriter and you can be saying like really serious shit. You can do that a lot of nights in a row in coffee houses and bars and nobody's listening.
This is Champagne is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box Studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Welcome to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. This is Sven, and today I am here with Paul Kotheimer, and you may know Paul, having played bass with Morgan Orion and the Afterburners, but mainly he plays as Paul Kotheimer as the singer-songwriter. Paul, welcome to Champagne is Also a Band podcast.
Great to be here, Sven. Thanks for having me.
No worries. All right, and so for today, we're going to listen to your song, Let's Hang, off of your album, Terrarium. So, without further ado, let's listen to the song and then we'll just talk about it.
Great. Let's hang.
Let's hang.
Yeah, you and me, let's swing.
Let's swing.
Fine. Without a care in the world, and all our bills paid too. Ooh, at least until Tuesday, let's blow it off.
Blow it off.
No need to even give it a second thought.
Don't give
It doesn't even have to rhyme. You know you've worked more than enough. And now it's 5:30, fuck this shit o'clock. Yeah, I just said that 'cause that's what time it is. So let's relax and just forget about those little aches and pains.
Forget those aches.
Yeah, let's kick back and kick it and think of all those sweet, sweet hearts and friends, good friends, keep you from going crazy. Let's dance.
Let's dance.
Let those who wish to make romance, baby, hey, get a room, you two, and take a world of care off your mind, dear friend of mine. And let's hang and take it nice and easy.
Let's hang. Let's sway. Play that thing.
So let's relax and just forget about those little aches and pains.
Forget those aches.
Yeah, let's kick back and kick it and think of all those sweet, sweet hearts and friends, good friends, keep you from going crazy. Let's dance.
Let's dance.
Let those who wish to make romance, baby, yes, and take a world of care off your mind and totally unwind. And let's hang. Let's just
hang.
So my favorite question that I always like to start off with is, do you start off with the lyrics first, or do you find something on the guitar, or do you have a melody in your head that you just match with the guitar and lyrics later?
Songwriting process question. The short answer is it's complicated. And to elaborate, most of the time when I have a song brewing, what's happening is there's an idea. From elsewhere in my catalog, you may know, a lot of people know this song of mine about the $100 bill in the tip jar. It's called Ballad of the Benjamin. So in that case, what happened was like literally a year went by when I was walking around going, I should write a song about the $100 bill in the tip jar. I mean, because like that's going to be a rock. Yeah, that's a hit. I'm going to get it, And so that voice will be going on in my head for a really long time. But it will take a long time before I actually sit down and make the thing happen. In this case, in the case of Let's Hang, like probably the length of time it took me to write the vast majority of the song is shorter than it takes to perform the song. It was like, oh, well, it's just this chord progression that I loop around, mostly stolen from vintage music. Mm-hmm. And then the lyrics like literally came from off the top of my head. Then after that, there's a long period of micro tweaking, stuff that most listeners wouldn't even notice that I changed a half of a word or changed a phrasing a tiny bit. In the case of this song, that's how it was. Like 95% of the song was like plump right on my plate. Without even thinking it through. Words, music, I don't know, it just happened. But then it's all about the micro tweaks. And also with this song, it's totally about the arrangement, about bringing the people together to make it, to make it this vintage magic thing.
Okay, so if we're going to talk about the people, okay, how many musicians are taking part in this recording process for this song?
There's me, and me on voice, guitar, piano, bass, and then there was a recording session featured Graham Duncan. So there was a session that took place at the Music Building where I recorded guitar and vocal together, and Graham Duncan was the recording engineer at that. And then Elizabeth Simpson came to do a demo version of the 4-part harmony. So she sang all 4 parts separately over just what would end up being the lead guitar solo section. So she did that. And so then I had this chunk that I could bring to other people and say, okay, when we do this 4-voice singing group, here's what it's gonna sound like. Okay. And then from there, I got the 2 singers, Jen and Olivia from Chickadee Sermon, involved, and Emily McCown from Sororise and also now in Relevator involved. And I heard she was on your show recently.
Yeah. So
those were the big 4 vocalists, Jen, Olivia, Emily, and Elizabeth. They rehearsed with me for about, on and off, maybe 3 or 4 sessions over the course of about a month in the wintertime. And then in February, we tried it live one time at the Rose Bowl as part of a Girls Rock CU fundraiser where all of them were participating, as Girls Rock supporters. And so it was great to be invited on stage to do that. And then once we knew we could, flub our way through it at the Rose Bowl and get away with it, we said, well, we're probably ready to take it to the studio for real. And then we got a date with Ryan Groff at Perennial. Chickadee Sermon is already working there on a record. And so they were already familiar with the place, and Elizabeth and Emily had not seen it before, and it's a magical wonderland. So that was a great little session. And let's see what was left to do after that. We've got the vocals in the band, and then it was Clayton's turn. Clayton Deering, formerly of The Fights, and in lots and lots of other projects that I don't even think I could list here. He lives right down the street from me in East Urbana, and I asked him to put that pedal steel on there. And so we got together in his little basement recording studio and did that final overdub. So that was everybody.
Yeah, I thought some of the effects that were used, it does sound like a vintage recording, straightforward, like right out of the 1950s. Of you would hear it crackling on your phonograph, if you would say that. But one thing that I noticed is that you have that slide guitar that's just kind of floating in the back. It's like drenched in reverb, and it's just hanging out in the back, and it's adding those. It sounds so distinctively like 50s style, and
thanks for noticing.
Some of those like crunchy 4-part harmonies in the background are so good. Sorry if this is a repeat, but did you write those 4 parts? I mean, in terms of
that's written ahead of time. I have a program called Sibelius. I've been writing charts in Sibelius for a long time. I did that for David Chang when he was in town and we played together in Theory of Everything. I would write out parts for him to play, and if you can work with people who can read the charts, then it makes it a million times easier. So yeah, all that's written out ahead of time. We tweaked the arrangement as we went in a couple of really small ways, but it's almost exactly the way it was on the paper when we went in the studio. So I'm happy, super happy with how that turned out.
I guess I'll even back up more. Is this a particular style of music that you spend a lot of time listening to in general, or did you just say, hey, this would be, I mean, I enjoy this style of music, but is this something that I want to take a crack at making that kind of a sound? Well,
I've been doing vintage recording styles and vintage songwriting styles almost on every release I've done in the past 20 years. There's been at least one. There was one called Everybody Smokes in Hell that I put out in the year 2000. That was co-written with Brandon T. Washington and recorded at Pogo Studio back in the day. It had Brian Wilkie on guitar, who's a local scene expatriate, and had Ian Shepherd on drums and Tim Green on piano, and so the people from the jazz scene at that time. Since then, I tend to do a number that's either like a samba number or a classic swing number or an old time number. I've got a number called Let's Keep It That Way that I put out on an EP about 3 years ago. That's more like 20s old timey music or Depression era old timey music. And I'm always intrigued by making a current day recording studio sound old timey in one way or another. I've never gone so far as to actually I have, but I've never shared it with the world, gone so far as to have record Pops and Crackles and just put that on in the background. There are songs that do that the digital release of this song has the Pops and Crackles from a vinyl record included. And I didn't go there. I don't go there. But I am wildly curious about working with old analog formats. Even if I could get my hands on a record lathe that cuts a disc, heck yeah, I'd use it. Oh yeah. Can I cuss on this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Hell
Fuck yeah, I'd use it. If this was weft, they'd say no, probably not. Just keep it under your tongue if you can. But obviously you can bleep stuff out or whatever you need to do, or I can just say fuck.
I have a plugin that will actually add cracks, and you can even tell it to I think
denser
it's isotrope or whatever. Is that it's free on Reverb. I was able to get that plugin, but it even has a spin down one where you can hit it and it does that.
Oh wow!
And ends, but the only thing is then it stays down there, so you have to have the automation to say hey, stop doing that, and then it will bring it back.
Fun toys.
That was one of the discussions I had with Zoe Willott and Emily McCown, just having, they both spent a lot of time on their own using their laptops and putting music together that way. And with today's technology, you can really get a good sounding album with just having a really good ear and having good EQ and just a few plugins, and it does a lot of the magic for you. How long have you been playing music?
I've been playing music since kindergarten, so that'd be 45 years-ish, 44 years. But and I've been writing songs since I was 13, so that'd be I can't do the math. Yeah, that'd be math. Not quite 40 years, 35 years, and I've been playing bass in bands since 1982 or 3. So yeah, kind of a long time.
So when you started these words, did you knew that you wanted? I'm just not surprised. Surprise isn't the right word. What was your motivation to match the Let's Hang words with this style of music? Or did it just seem very intuitive to you? Or did you just say, well, I'd like to try that?
That's a fun question. I can't quite remember what got me to sing a song entitled Let's Hang. I think I was just sort of thinking about making a little contrast between the vintage style. Let's Hang, I don't think was a thing that you would have said in 1951. I think you would have said let's hang out, or you would have said that people were hanging out. But I don't know enough history of American slang to know for sure. But I'm pretty sure that let's hang is something that's a little more recent than that. So already there's a friction between the present and the past, and I kind of liked that, and I wanted to roll with that. And then when I hit upon the line, it's fuck this shit o'clock. It's half past fuck this shit o'clock. Yeah, that's kind of where it was like, well, today you don't say half past, or most. I mean, maybe they do in some parts of America, but not others, or maybe they do in some English speaking. But in my ear, half past sounds like something that's a little old timey all by itself. But fuck this shit o'clock is obviously something that didn't make sense to anyone until like 2013 or so. And so to put those two things together was the fun for me. And like when I hit that line and I knew that it was going to fall at the spot where the verse jumps to the break, I knew it belonged there. And I knew I was onto something, and everything else around it is like kind of a no-brainer for me. Like I write a lot of songs that are like a lot of gut wrenching and a lot of hard work on the lyrics, but lyrically, seriously, total no-brainer. This song. I
love the fact that you are able to utilize the background singers to be like, what? At that point, just do this nice slide down, like, phew. Yeah.
There was a different cue there, and we changed it to a what from something else. And I don't remember what it was before, but what we ended up with was definitely it was golden. Top secret information here that I can share with the world is that we did that one. We did those cues. That one cue, we did it completely separately. It wasn't like it was part of the flow of the song. We just like said, okay, let's not roll the tape and let's just do some whats.
Oh.
And they just did some whats. And I said, that one. And we spliced it in without the tape rolling. So, I mean, it ruins the magic, doesn't it? To think that we just did that separately and spliced it in. It was like a sample.
Oh. I think that makes it really interesting, to be able to have, that we can do that in such an, not an easy way, but I mean that it's something that in the digital realm you can just kind of slice it and add it where you like it, and
yeah, I could put that. I could make that a snare, and it could be kick what, kick what, anytime I wanted to. I mean, I might
your next big hit right there.
Right. Totally. How
would you classify your writing style, other than singer-songwriter is just such kind of a broad term? But I mean, I'm going to carry on a little bit more with why I'm asking this, is because I feel like even your most serious topics that you address, you always have some, like, a wink and a nod with it, where you have the cleverness of, I don't want to call it dad jokey, but just you have a little, you play with it a little bit in terms of your lyrics. I'm not sure exactly how I want to say it as I'm coming up with some of these questions as we talk, but
here's what I can tell you about that. All right, you can be a super serious songwriter and you can be saying like really serious shit. You can do that a lot of nights in a row in coffee houses and bars, and nobody's listening. And it starts to turn you into a self-loathing monster. And the way to fix that problem is to crack jokes. Oh. If you stop taking yourself seriously and make it at least a little bit of a curveball humor, then people will actually listen. I don't know when or how I learned that. I know that probably when I was in my 20s, I was a serious songwriter, and I wrote about serious stuff. Like, and that batch of songs I don't listen to anymore because I was trying too hard. now that I'm going somewhere with a particular song, when I find the funny thing about the serious situation, that's when like the songwriting tap turns all the way on, and then it can come out. So it may be that the funny thing about being funny is that I simply couldn't write a song without it anymore.
Well, I remember when I had Isaac Arms on with Withershins, they said that they would write songs in such a way, and the way that it would be constructed within the music that they wrote, and then how the band itself would arrange it, is that they always had to have a part that was just so loud that it would get everyone's attention at the bar. I just think it's interesting that they're that in some ways your own songwriting is informed by how you take it out and perform it, and how to put, and I guess in some ways maybe I'm saying the most duh-iest thing, but it just fascinates me because, you know, for the most part, in terms of my writing, I'm a very much like write it and get it recorded, or write it and have it out there and not worry specifically about a performative issue or having to take it out on the road kind of thing. So it's very fascinating to hear that sense of you take your craft so seriously that, in a joking way, that you take it so seriously that you realize it's important to be able to have that connection with the audience in order to make your serious point come across.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. Number one is that making records is great because you can perform for people over and over again at your best, whenever they want to hear you. And also, music is more of a live performance art. As much as I totally respect and enjoy listening to a lot of artists who seem to do almost all of their work like in private, in their bedrooms, in their studio, Sanctum Sanctorum, Fortress of Solitude. There's lots of great music that comes from that. And for me, I have to have this kind of love-hate relationship back and forth with the stage, because being on stage is about hospitality. A lot of times you're like welcoming people and you're at their service in a way that you're not when you're in your bedroom studio. You know, when you're in your bedroom studio, you're the boss of you and nobody else is the boss of you. At a live venue, a lot of times you're staff. You're like, you know, another one of the bartenders, and if you get a tip in your tip jar, then cool. For me, the two have to work together well. As much as I hate lugging gear, I have to accept it.
I see. Yes. But just be glad that you didn't like pick up drums.
Well, the upright bass is not as bad as a drum set, but it has its it has its drawbacks, especially if there's a flight of stairs involved.
Flashback to Mike and Molly's upstairs.
Oh yeah. Yes. I don't think. Oh no, I did have to bring my bass up there once. I played with Morgan up on that stage one time.
I miss that a lot, especially that was one of those things that kept going even throughout the winter months. Yeah. You know, that was one of the places that you could go there 2 or 3 times a week and see a great show.
Get a live music fix.
And like it would always be local people and it would always have some out of town act. So it was kind of the icing on the cake. Let's see. So you had written this and you were starting to put it together. How did you know that you wanted to have just bass, piano, guitar, and slide? Or did you just, is that one of those, forgive me for my ignorance, but is that a standard setup for, I mean, I can see the guitar, bass, and piano, but the slide, it fit and it sounded exactly like it should. But I didn't know if that, because when somebody says like I had a jazz trio, you
Right.
know exactly what instruments
does
there
that?
should be. So was there a particular reason that it was that kind of configuration?
The two-word answer we're looking for is Western swing.
Ah,
Right. So if you've ever seen in
Yeah.
town, there's Big Sandy and the Fly Right Boys will play, or I know that I've heard people who play pedal steel will talk about the fact that like when Hank Williams Sr. was playing Hey Good Lookin' What You Got Cookin', I don't think there was such a thing as a pedal steel guitar. It was just a lap steel, and the performer had to figure out how to move the slide back and forth to get various kinds of chord configurations, whereas now you've got these pedals and you push down a pedal and it loosens or tightens one of the strings in the configuration so that you can go up or down a half step or even a whole step. And the magic of the pedal steel comes along in like 60s or 70s country western, and it has this sort of, you know, buttery, mellow flavor that can go all over a ballad, but it also can be played with speed and dexterity in a way that you know, makes for like jaw-dropping solos. And I knew that I knew that without it, it would have a feel that was that was 50s, and that might hang together with something like Patsy Cline or with Nat King Cole. So like that, those two artists are from around the same time period, and they could have a similar feel if they did a swing ballad. But when you put the pedal steel in there, it's like laser beam western swing. And I wanted that partly because of the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl has been, you know, a home away from home for Urbana acoustic music for probably 5 years with Hootenanny, and at the time when I wrote it, I didn't know that this amazing development was going to happen where Marty and Charlie and Sam now own the bar. There's been a lot of inspiration in my songwriting career that just these past few years that's come from going to Rose Bowl for Hootenanny, and it just seemed like the right thing. It works the opposite way too, where it's like I know these people from town and they're my friends and I know what they do, and I can kind of like, I don't have to go to central casting and think about a generic thing. I'm thinking about specific people and writing for them specifically, and that's a trick that I learned from working with David and from studying jazz music. I mean, there's this thing that's going around about Duke Ellington, you know, not to say that I'm as good as Duke Ellington because I know this arranging trick, but no, it's a standard arranging trick that your music goes to the next level when you're not writing a piece for trumpet. You're writing for that particular trumpeter because you know how they can nail it. I wasn't as familiar with each of these musicians that I worked with, but I sort of had a hunch because I'd heard Emily do stacked harmonies on her own recent demo. I knew that Elizabeth Simpson was, you know, a jazz glee club close harmony singer. It's obvious when you go to see Chickadee Sermon that their strong point is that they do their high harmonies in unison. And I said, well, if you put those two on top and put the other two underneath, then you're going to have a great quartet with a lot of experience already behind it, and they could probably just walk in and nail it. And so it was about knowing the people around me that helped me make it happen. And then, you know, Clayton, I worked with him a little bit when Morgan would have him on board, and I just knew that it would be a fun project for us to work on together. So yeah, the whole thing fell together.
It's interesting because it's like you're painting with their timbre in a way, like you're using their particular tones and their particular performance style, as well as their especially with formatting the 4-part harmony, as you're stacking the chords based on this timbre that they all have. Did you know that their voices would blend so well?
I had a hunch. I mean, I could hear where each of their ranges were. I mean, that's a thing when you listen to singers. It's like you can tell whether they're a low or a middle voice, and you know, I knew who was high. I didn't quite know who was going to be on each level, but I had a hunch. And the way it worked out, it was just like Elizabeth was low, Emily was next, and then Olivia, and then Jen on the top. And it was just like, I wasn't sure, exactly who was going to take which, but I kind of knew that it was either going to be the top two and the bottom two, either where they ended up or flip-flopped. Yeah, I remember being a little worried about it because I wasn't that familiar with Jen and Olivia's work. And so I was kind of like, there was one time I went to see them play and I was like, okay, what note is she hitting there? That's her highest note. And I'd be like, I'll try and figure that out later. So let's see. It looks like they're playing in A. And so if you hit that high note there, I was trying to figure all that out. So I was like, I'm pretty sure they can hit all the notes that are on this chart. And I'm pretty sure they can do it no problem.
I was going to ask about kind of how you enunciate in this and how you use your voice, that it just sounded distinctive, and it almost it had a little bit of like Louis Armstrong and just some of those earlier vocal performers, and even in that style. I'm sure that was intentional, but was it something that you set out to be like, I need to focus on making that sound, or does it just naturally come out that way when you perform in that style? I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, those are good questions. You're familiar with Louis Prima, aren't you?
I probably, but it's not hitting my
right.
It's not hitting my mind.
So Louis Prima was a New Orleans trumpet player of the probably most famous in the 50s, and he's responsible for the version of Just a Gigolo that David Lee Roth stole whenever that was in the late 80s. There's a movie that slips my mind what it's called right now. It was like one of these 90s movies that was set in the 50s, and the movie is the premise of the movie is Louis Prima is going to come to dinner at this little Italian restaurant, and everything that happens there, and his music was featured throughout it, and that's kind of like how Louis Prima got remastered for CD and re-released on CD and like collected it there in the 90s. And so I've been aware of Louis Prima for a long time, and his music has flair and tons of personality, and he's got a silly version of Pennies from Heaven, and that silly version of Just a Gigolo, and so he treats the classic catalog with a lot of humor, and his rhythm section is super tight, and it's a little big band, so just two horns and a rhythm section. And he also has some hokey novelty numbers about Sputnik. There's a song called Beep 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 that has like a weird little electronic noise that might be a theremin or might be just like some kind of oscillator on a switch, about traveling through outer space, but it's just like a little blues riff that sounds like it could be Bill Haley and the Comets, but it's got this stupid thing about how the satellite goes beep beep beep, just like my heart does when
right. I'm gonna have to check that out, and I will reference that in the liner notes if I can find it.
I mean, type in Louis Prima to any Spotify or YouTube, and I'm sure you'll get at least his top 10 best known hits. And Louis Prima definitely ripped off Louis Armstrong. I mean, he was a trumpet player. He was in New Orleans, and he played in the same kind of style where he didn't have to hit a lot of notes, but everything had tons of power. And that same sort of improvisational melody style where there doesn't need to be a lot of variation up and down. It doesn't need to have a lot of long notes. It can be short and punchy, and like really playing with the lyrics, and a lot of licks, a lot of little riffs and things. That's what Louis Armstrong taught to the entire American songbook, and Louis Prima ripped it off, and then I ripped it off from there, and so did everybody else. So I don't feel bad about stealing it. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely that kind of phraseology, and that was definitely what I was thinking of when I make the little crack about how it doesn't even have to rhyme. That's definitely like the kind of thing that a jazz singer in that style, that little crack that you would throw in. So yeah, it's all there, all those things.
Champagne is also a Band podcast is proud to support Jubilee Cafe. Jubilee Cafe is a free weekly meal program at Community United Church of Christ, 805 South 6th Street in Champaign, Illinois. Jubilee Cafe serves a home-cooked meal from 5 to 6:30 each Monday. Their mission is to feed hungry people by cooking healthy, delicious meals and by serving their guests restaurant-style with servers waiting on tables. Jubilee Cafe is open to anyone who cares to eat with them. Because food insecurity among students is so high, they serve students as well as others in and around the Champaign-Urbana community who struggle with hunger. Meals are free to all and will be served each Monday evening, located in the accessible lower level of the building at 6th and Daniel Streets in Champaign. For more information on the meal or how to volunteer, go to the Jubilee Cafe CUCC Facebook page or email them at jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. That's jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. It sounds like as long as you have been here in Champaign-Urbana, you've been a part of the scene, wouldn't you say? Or
Yeah, sure. I came here in 1993, and I found the Red Herring Coffee House. They had a Thursday night open stage at that time, and the host of that open stage was John Davis, and he's been in Seattle probably for about 20 years now, but he was living in the belfry above the Channing-Murry Foundation at that time, and was doing stuff like hosting movie nights, and he has lots of stories about how Steve Albini blew off firecrackers in the place and has never been invited back, and just really great local music history. And he says he has a 4-track tape of the first ever time that Poster Children played ever out live, and that he recorded it just for fun because he was at the Channing-Murry at the time. And John Davis it was great that he was the first person I met, because he's a very soft-spoken anchor of the Champaign-Urbana scene from that time. And so he taught me a lot of stuff about just like how to host a venue, and just be a quiet presence and make sure that everything works, and setting up PA system and hosting an open stage kind of thing. And so that was a great first step and a great place to start. And at the time I had demos that I had made in Chicago before I came down for grad school, and grad school didn't go well. We'll not talk about that. So anyway, in those early times, in the early to mid 90s, for me, there's a lot of cool stuff was happening. Like Mabel's was still a thing, and the Blind Pig, I think, had kind of just started where the Cowboy Monkey is now. And at the time also stuff was happening, like that whole grunge thing that helped Hum and Mother go from local to national was starting to happen at that time. And I was also doing sound and helping organize shows for bands that I'd never heard of because I was a little too old for it. So there was I was a little too young for one group, and then I was a little too old for the other group, and the other group was, Braid and American Football. I was like, well, I've never heard of these bands, but I guess they're playing here tonight.
Nice. Well, it's stuff like that makes me think, this is why we want to give voice to any bands that are starting up, because you never know, they may turn out to be something completely famous. But there are certainly some people here that do have those aspirations, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get some national acclaim.
Yeah,
and
I hope it
that
happens.
just keeps happening.
I hope it happens for all of them.
All of those that want it.
Yeah, everybody that wants it.
Yeah.
Us tired old motherfuckers who want to stay home. We can stay home.
That's right. Your Handmade Records is celebrating its 25th anniversary, or has celebrated. I think it was, or is it
will celebrate.
And will celebrate 25 years. And
25.
Yeah. So what? Well, first, where does the name come from? Hopefully, it's not super obvious.
No, it's totally super obvious.
Okay.
The idea was that it, originally I thought to myself, what it would be like if you took a scissors and cut a circle that would be the label that you put on a vinyl record, and you did each one by hand. That would be the handmade record label. The label itself would be, I thought about that as like, what if that was literally what I freaking did,
Yes.
And then I realized that was stupid. But at the time I was putting up cassettes and I was making them in batches, short batches of 100 or 200, which was about like where at the time that's where you can get the right price bump. And so 200 cassettes is a flat that you could carry in a single box if you needed to. It's not convenient to carry that many around, but and instead of making 500 or 1,000 and having them each shrink wrapped and each with was J card that was produced at a press, and you had to pay for these color separations and all these other things that had to be done before it was all digital. I said, you know what, I'm gonna do, aside from the duplication of the cassettes themselves, I'm going to see how much of it I can do by hand myself. And so I was doing stuff like cutting and folding and scoring J cards and folding them over and packing them in, and then put the cassette in and flip this cassette closed, and that's one done, 199 to go. And so I did it like that. And now it's kind of like lots of bands do that. I mean, and probably at the time lots of bands did that too. But
You took a special pride in doing it by hand.
Yeah. It was kind of like I really wanted to think about each copy being unique, and I wanted to think about the time that I put in doing one at a time being meaningful. But I didn't have the whole package yet. I was still trying to make it look like it was pro. That when you grabbed my merch in your hand, you didn't know that I had done all these things by hand to it. It looked like, and probably in the 90s and the early aughts, there were lots of people who were like, trying to make the outside of the tray card look just like it would if it was on RCA Victor, or whatever big record label, and trying to make the inside liner notes look just like they would if they, and in that process, us DIY people ended up teaching ourselves a lot of things about, like how to do desktop publishing and how to interact with, some Kinkos or whatever to get it to look just right. And, and now it's all of that is like so totally baked in, and it probably was at the time too, but I thought it was unique. The merch making is baked into being a band. It's like, that's totally a thing that you have to do if you want to be a band and go from town to town or bar to bar. You want to make extra gas money, you got to have merch. And in order to have merch, it's going to take a lot of cut, fold, paste, assemble. Yeah. One down, 199 to go. So that's how the handmade record label became one of the the sort of the focus and the thing of what I did. And then 5 years later, I was lucky enough to get good advice from people who knew stuff about the internet, because I thought I was going to get hand-made records as my website, and they said, don't do that. Just have it be Handmade Records, all one word. And so now I'm the proud owner of handmaderecords.com, and that's coming up on its 20th anniversary. In June, I will have had that website for 20 years. It's completely derelict, like you go there and you'll see stuff that I put up in 2007, and I don't know how to change it really. I could go into the details about who's hosting it and all this other stuff. Someday I'll set aside a few $100 and have it done right, and then it'll just point to my Bandcamp and point to the iTunes, and it'll just be, it's in one sense it's like it's dumb for me to have my own website web address, and on the other hand, handmaderecords.com, dang. It might be, just objectively financially might be the most, profitable thing about my entire music career is the fact that I own, that URL. Yep.
But I did want to say something that kind of pops into my head as you're talking about doing the handmade records, that, and maybe it's just for me to say to myself, but as much as I can feel like a fuck up, I think it's fascinating and very reassuring to think that the way that you end up learning how to do things right is by doing them wrong for a lot of the time, and going through all of that. Doing things wrong is how you figure out how to do them right, I guess, is the way I'd like to look at it.
And also, another fun facet of that is doing things wrong because you don't know what the rules are helps you innovate and break all the rules and become a new and innovating thing. So, and this is one of the like bedrock things about punk rock, DIY culture, grassroots working class culture, is that you don't know the rules because you haven't been to school. And because of that, you do what you can with what you have on hand, and the folk process too. You do what you can with what you have on hand, and then Shazam, you made something new that nobody had invented before. So yeah, totally. So I'm saying not only is it your way that you learn how to do things right by doing them wrong over and over again, but also you also invent new things by blowing past the rules, not knowing what they even are.
Let's see, what is your favorite venue in the Champaign-Urbana music scene?
Well, as I've hinted earlier, I'm having a real sweet spot for the Rose Bowl these days. I've been friends with Sam and Marty and Charlie since I first discovered that there's this Monday night open mic that's called Hootenanny, and that was like 6 or 7 years ago that I started going there. I always have admired the way that Sam Payne hosts an open mic. Instead of having a list that you sign up on, he would just keep it all in his head. I don't know if you heard, but Emily McCown is taking over from Sam and is going to do the hosting of Monday Night Hootenanny, and I think that's a really cool thing. And she has like lots of really great ideas and wants to keep that vibe going. And I think that's a really great instinct. And she can do whatever she chooses, of course. The other facets of my favoritism for the Rose Bowl include, number one, it's so darn close to my house. Iron Post is the same way. I love how Iron Post is a real musician's bar and really supports downtown Urbana and is an anchor there. And I'm pretty biased in favor of Urbana, not just because it's walking distance downtown Urbana from my house, but also just because it's been the underdog for an awfully long time.
Yeah, well, and it's coming out more and more that it seems like Champaign has been kind of dropping the ball with a lot of venues in Champaign, downtown Champaign, that are drying up, and a lot of venues in Urbana that are just kind of appearing, out of not nowhere, but I mean, the effort has been stepped up, and I feel like now it's going to be more Urbana that you go to find music every single night, live music every single night.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with how do you maximize the amount of money you make as a bar when there are lots and lots of bars elbow to elbow all around the block. And live music might not be the most profitable thing for a bar on a Saturday night. Let's face it, most of the people who go out, I don't know what it is that they want to do, but what they want to do is hang out and watch TV and drink, it looks like to me, and to see a band is like, wait a minute, I have to plunk down an extra 2 drinks worth of money,
right,
just to be in this place. I didn't sign up for this. I'm going to go to the other bar and leave this bar empty. And then the bartenders or the owners who, maintain the books, they see that. They're like, oh, the live music came in. We started charging a cover. And then people were like, oh, there's a cover tonight. I'm going someplace else. Bye. And they go, well, the answer to this is to get rid of the cover. And the cover is for the live music. So the live music has to go. Bye. And then the live musicians go, oh no, we are homeless now. And also jobless.
And if you do have live music and there's no cover, then people seem to be coming in more, but I can't say necessarily if that's the case. I don't know. They don't necessarily appreciate it unless they kind of chunk down a little bit of change. So.
Yeah, and I think also there's a question of, like, when people are going out, are they going to a concert venue that happens to serve alcohol? Or are they going to a bar that happens to have a band? And this is, of course, discounting completely that there's a really great indie, DIY, all-ages scene that's happening in basement rooms and at the IMC and, all over Champaign-Urbana that's not about selling drinks, that somehow manages to get band after band from out of town, even on weeknights, in front of a packed house, even though that house is very, very small, and 20 people constitutes packed. That's also happening. But when we talk about bars and music and concerts, there is that question. It's like, well, what are the people there for? Are they there for a drink, or are they there for the band? And it really seems to me, anyway, that in downtown Urbana, at all, I've mentioned two places, and there's really quite a few that are popping right now. Blackbird and 25 O'Clock and Sip Yard and lots of places in downtown Urbana are hosting live music more and more often. And to me, anyway, it seems like the people are there to support that performance. Those bars have other nights where it's like, you could just shoot pool or watch TV or hang out with your friends. But for the most part, when they're full, they're full for bands.
Yeah. I mean, one that pops into my head right away is like the Iron Post. Mm-hmm. That's you don't see that particularly packed unless there's music. And talk about a place that also brings in kind of the, I guess campus scene isn't the right word, but it at least brings in performers from the U of I, the jazz
Parkland Jazz Group too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
C4A groups. Iron Post is a host to all of those, educational related musical ensembles that, aren't necessarily rock. Sometimes it's student work, but it's super high caliber student work. And then also there's professors, people who teach music for a living, who are leading bands and ensembles. Top notch. Can't say a bad word about Iron Post. Dang. Except for that lock on the men's room door. We don't have to talk about that.
Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to support Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street, located in the old train station building at 100 North Chestnut Street in downtown Champaign, has been helping to build record collections since 2004. Carrying a wide array of new and used LPs, CDs, and video games. Exile on Main Street has something for just about any music enthusiast and old-school gaming devotee. Exile also hosts regular free live music shows on its stage, so be sure to check out their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for the up-to-date details on the next upcoming event. Open 7 days a week, they can be reached by phone at 217-398-MAIN. That's 217-398-6246. Let's just talk about, what is your favorite non-musical thing?
Well, my favorite non-musical thing is art that's not music. Anything, theater, visual arts, and creativity in general. And of course, that's, music is a subset of that.
Well, is there a particular visual art these days that is just floating your boat, or?
This weekend was Boneyard Arts Festival in Champaign-Urbana, and I saw so much amazing visual art of all kinds. I'm just blown away that Champaign-Urbana is so dense with talent of every kind, including, scrappy music scene or whatever it is that we do. But yeah, oh wow, just blown away by so much stuff in Boneyard this weekend. I don't know what I like, but I know it when I see it. It's one of those goofy things. I saw some works at the warehouse next to 25 O'Clock yesterday, and I can't remember the artist's name off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody will shout it at the screen when they hear me. But there are these big, what looks like poster paper, like 3 feet by 5 feet. And then there'll just be a really small number of elements, and it'll be like a single texture and a single color in a kind of a blob. And then it looks like everything was put together extremely quickly, but that a lot of experience is behind this extremely quick movement. And I think that's what I found most compelling about it. It was like, well, if you think you could do this yourself, you could do as well as this your own self, you're wrong. What you would put together under these circumstances would look like shit. And what this person is doing is masterful work, even if it takes 10 seconds. And how it got to be masterful in that extremely quick action was, by amassing experience and by thinking about it really deeply. And to me, that's pretty darn inspiring.
All right, so the artist that Paul mentioned was Jodi Birdwell, and you can find their work at jodibirdwell.com. So check it out, and I'll also include that in the liner notes. All right, now back to the show.
Another thing I did at Boneyard was I stopped by the Rogards building, which is like they're just south of downtown Champaign. And I popped in there and I saw these humongous sort of free stroke bouquet paintings by Faith Gabel. And so they're these big panels about 4 feet by 4 feet or maybe even larger with like really big brush strokes of just flowers, just pure aesthetic pleasure, just like doesn't have to mean anything beyond what you see is what you get. And I just really appreciated those. So paintings, Boneyard.
All right. Do you venture into any of those other than musical arts?
Well, I'm married to a really great collage artist, and she has taken up the entire dining room table with her work. And this is Jessie Riddell, who's the executive director of the Idea Store, which...
Oh, okay.
So
shout outs to the Idea Store.
Yeah, totally. So that's a thing that she does, and I thought I was a halfway decent collage artist because all of my CD covers for the past some years have been collages, and I make collage postcards for people occasionally, or a little of this and a little of that. Or if you're going to make a flyer for a show, you could sometimes toss a collage together, a couple elements here and there. And I've frequently made collages out of just take an issue of National Geographic and really quickly, without thinking of it, pick 3 images and then slap them together. See what happens. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So that's kind of like that's the level that I'm at. Whereas she will sit and meticulously cut a person out of a background. It's like I could say, you could do that in Photoshop.
Right.
And she'd be like, shut up.
Yes.
So that's one of my connections to visual arts is that. Also, my dad was a watercolor painter his whole life, and I have some really, really wonderful things that are left from that career. Bowls of fruit, houses, beaches, lighthouses.
Yeah, watercolor is so underrated because it's so hard to do well. If it's done well, it is just done so amazing. Watercolor, yeah.
I envy painters of all kinds because I just I feel like, darn it, I could be good at this. I can sketch okay, and I can draw little cartoons okay. How come but every time I try and paint, it's just like, this is a disaster. I quit forever. Bye.
Yes. You mentioned theater, I believe, too. Are you an actor of any kind, or?
Well, again, it's like one of these things where I used to do that sort of thing. I feel like I can read lines okay.
I was Constable Warren once in our town. I'm just sorry.
I was Mr. Darling in Peter Pan okay.
Nice.
I'm not kidding.
No, that's fine. That's
yeah. So yeah, I've been into that kind of thing, and I've also been involved in local arts scene things where music composition crisscrosses with live spoken word theater. There's a thing called the Performers Workshop Ensemble, which may or may not still be happening at the moment, but they used to have house theater that involved like some songs, some acting, some experimental electronic music, some of this and some of that. So that was a thing I did here in Champaign-Urbana in the 90s and early aughts. I feel like it all goes together. It's just, creativity is creativity, and what you use to make it come out is, and how it comes out, that's just details.
Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And talking about your song, Let's Hang, off of your album, Terrarium, which can be found on Bandcamp. And I believe that you're making some very thoroughly work-intensive 25 limited copies of this album as well, hard copy that people can buy. Are those going to be available on Bandcamp or?
No, I don't think so. I think the way to go for this is to say I have made them available as pre-orders to just friends, and I'll have them in my merch case when I have my merch case with me. Maybe by the time you hear this, they'll be all gone. You know, I've gotten some into the hands of some old friends who always want one from me, and 25 is an okay number, such that I don't feel like I'll be carrying them around forever and ever. Will I do a second pressing? I'm not sure. I definitely won't do them on the floor. The first time I did them, I was kneeling on the floor doing the rubber stamping, and then my back hurt for like literally a whole week after that. So I need to find a surface that's like, you know, like a big picnic table, you know. And of course my wife could let me have the dining room table after she's done making all of her amazing artwork. We'll talk about that later, dear.
Excellent. Well, Paul,
Yes.
thank you so much for being on the show and making the journey out to the good old Sororise. And I look forward to hearing more of your work, and I'll certainly post something about your 25th anniversary if there's a party coming up, that kind of thing.
It's all a party.
It's always a party.
Always a party.
Okay, excellent.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. This is Paul Kotheimer, Urbana songwriter, reminding you, great music is out there. Go find it where you live.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
Pogo Studio, South Beaker, on the